All right, so today we're talking about client messaging and Windows postMessage, which sort of fits in with this. So basically, we want to be able to send messages, which are bits of data, so objects, array, primitive values, between different tabs, between different windows, between windows and service workers. So any one of those combinations, we want to be able to pass data back and forth. So client messaging is specifically going to be between Windows and the service workers that control them. And like I said, postMessage we'll look at as something that sort of fits in here, but this is specifically to send messages between different tabs. All right, so what I have here, very basic web page. I've got a header, I've got a couple of buttons. One I'm going to use to open up a new tab and send a message to that tab, just to show very quickly how that's done. Then we're going to look at how to send a message to a service worker and receive a message from a service worker. In my script, I've got just a basic framework for what I've got. I've got a namespace here. The init method is going to fire when the page loads. I've got a reference to a message spot where I can write something out in the web page. We've got our service worker being registered. That's this script right here. Bare bones here, I have the listeners for the 4 primary events. And these aren't the only events that service workers have, but when it installs, when it activates, when it receives a fetch request, so service workers act kind of like a proxy server receiving requests for any sort of resource that's going to be loaded on the page, and then the message event. So if the service worker receives a message from a window object. And then I've got a method called sendMessage that we'll use to send messages from the service worker back to one or more clients. And that's what we're going to use to refer to all the tabs and windows that the service worker controls. They are all considered clients of the service worker. All right, so inner page, we've got service workers registered. We have click listeners for the 2 buttons. I don't have a listener for messages coming back from tabs yet. I don't have a message listener for the service worker. So if the service worker sends messages to its clients, including our page, we need to be able to receive that. So let's add those listeners first. The first one is going to be, we want to be able to receive any message being sent to our page from another page. So from our tab, or rather to our tab from another tab. So we're going to just add that on the window object, add event listener, and the event is just simply message. We're going to call the got message function down here, right here at the bottom. The message event has on it a property called data. So console.log ev.data. Data is the object being passed. So this is the data, the array, the object, the primitive value, thing that's being passed between the tabs or between the service worker and our page. Because we're going to use this method right here to receive messages from either a service worker or another page. The difference is, what are you attaching the listener to? So we're saying right here, navigator.serviceworker add event listener message. Same sort of idea. It's just we have to say that it's the service worker that's sending us the message. This is a message coming from another tab. This is a message coming from the service worker. Both of them are going to call this same thing right here. They're both going to call the function got_message and display it. All right, so we'll do this one first, the message sending thing. We're going to open up a new tab. When somebody clicks on the button to open a tab, we're going to call window.open. And I've done videos on this before. How do you open up a new tab, a new window? We're going to open up our same page here, index.html. So this page, we're just going to open up another copy of it. It will load the same CSS and JavaScript file. So it's going to also run this script, which means it's going to have this listener ready and waiting. So I want to have a reference to this. I'll save it for later, app.win. So this is going to be a reference to the tab that we just opened, and we're going to add a listener on that. We're going to listen for its load event. when that page loads, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to send a message to it. So app.winPostMessage, and it can be a string, could be an object, could be anything. I'm going to create a property called openTab. All right, so the me is our page right here. So this index.html file is opening up a new web page. When the page right here that we're opening, when it finishes loading, we're going to send a message to that other tab. So in the other tab, we should be able to see this because it's going to have this listener and it's going to receive the message and write it out in the console. Actually, let's do warn. I'm going to use warn inside this page, and inside my service worker, I'll use log. So visually, we'll be able to see the differences inside the console. All right, so here's our page. Refresh to make sure we've got the latest version of it. Great. I'm going to click on Open New Tab. There we are. New tab has been opened. So here's the original. Here's the new one. And we'll bring up Inspect so we can see here. There's all the things that were requested on this page. When I hit refresh, our service worker was installed and activated. It received requests for all these files. And then over in here, in this console, same sort of thing. The fetch requests for all those were received by the service worker. And on line 32, which is right down here, so this is the copy of message.js that is loading in the new tab. Got message fired, and there we go. Open tab. So this tab sent a message to this tab. It was received and displayed. And that's it. So as long as you have a reference to the window object where you want to send the message, and the tab that is opened will have the referrer property, the opener property, which points back to this page, the one that originally opened it. So you can send the messages back and forth with just this, a reference to whichever window you want to send it to, and the post message method. Okay, so that's it. That's the basics of post message, being able to send data back and forth. Now, the service worker. We have a listener here. If we receive a message from the service worker, then this method is also going to be called. So I want to be able to send a message to the service worker. That's our second button. In the service worker itself, we have a listener for the message event, and we'll display message received, and again, ev.data. The data property will hold that message. All right, so save that. We'll refresh our service worker, make sure we've got the latest version of that. Looks like we do. Yeah, so that's installed. Okay. Sending the message. When I click this button, this method's called, and I want to send a message over to that service worker. Well, first thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I have a reference to the latest service worker that's installed. And this is the way to do it. Navigator service worker .ready. This gives us a promise that resolves when we actually have the property reference to the current active registered installed service worker. So we're going to get a registered object back. This is the service worker that is registered, that's controlling our page. We could console.log reg.active. That is the service worker that we're talking about, the currently active service worker, because you can have service workers that are only installed and not active. So this is the active service worker, the one that's currently controlling our page. So the registration.active is the active service worker. We want to send a message to it. And here, we'll just do this. We'll say, let message equal current time date.now. There we go. So that's the message I'm going to send. It's going to be the current time inside of an object. This message object this one right here, is going to be sent to the service worker. Service worker will receive it here in this, and we should see it after message received. So we're using log here. We're using warn on this page. Okay, so here we have it, and we are going to, oh, here we'll come back to it on our original one. Send the message to the service worker. There we go. And here's the warn. So this is the reg.active. This is the active service worker. It's that file. And in the service worker.js on line 14, message received. So there is ev.data. We got the object received inside of our service worker. So right here. So this worked. Now, to send a message back, we're going to call this. And generally, you would do it from inside of one of these other functions. That's the events that are happening in the service worker. That's a good time to send a message back. If you want to send it from here, so inside of the fetch event, there is in here, on the event object, there's a property called client.id, capital I, lowercase d. That is the ID assigned to the current instance of the tab that's sending the fetch request. So this page right here that loaded the service worker, the one that made the request for this style sheet, for this shortcut icon, for this JavaScript file, when those fetch requests come in, there's a client ID on that fetch event. Inside here, in the message event, on the event object, there is a source property, and it has an ID property. This and this should be the same number if they're coming from the same page, but it's two different ways of getting that client ID. It is the client ID either way, just different names for those properties. So installed but not activated yet. So let's skip waiting, come back here. There we go, we're activated. I'll refresh to make sure we've got our latest JavaScript file there. Okay, service worker, line 11. There's the client ID. So a fetch request came in. Now I send the message. There we are. Message received in the service worker. And here is the client ID. And it is the same one as the fetch. So different property names, ev.clientID or ev.source.id. But it is the same ID. It is a reference to the client, the HTML file. Now, from either one of these, we can call our send message function, or call our send message function to send something back to the browser. To the main JavaScript that's attached to the web page. So inside of here, hello from fetch in the service worker. And let's pass in the EV client ID. And in this one, we'll pass in an object. It says hello from message in service worker. And we will attach the ID here. Now, I'm passing through a message and the ID, because it is possible to send a message at some point when you don't have necessarily the actual client ID yet. Like in here, activated and installed, if I'm calling it from here, or if I'm calling it from inside of another function that I've written here, I may not have the client ID. Or I may want to not just send it to this one client, but to all the tabs that are using this service worker. So if that is the case, down here, if I have client ID, so if I just called send message with this without the ID, this would be undefined. But if I do have this, if I do have the client ID, not phi, but if, else. If I do have the client ID, then I'm going to use a client's object. This is a built-in object that is available. It's the client's API. It is available in the service worker, not in the window object, but in the service worker. So in the, it's the global worker object. Inside there, we can access clients, and it has a method called get. If you pass the client ID to this, it will give you back a reference to the actual client object. So what's the web page that sent you this? So if I've got a client ID, it'll use that client ID and get the client for me. It's promise-based, so we can use a chain of then onto the end of it. This is the client object where we're going to send the message. So client.postMessage and the message right here, we're passing that in. So that should send it back to the single page. Okay, and we will skip waiting again. So we are activated now. Sending the message will come in. It'll be received. So we should, inside the message, we should see this message, message received, and then it's going to call send message, and it should post this back to the client, which is our script right here, and we should get a console.warn with that message from right here. So the hello from message should show up in a warn. So sending it in. There we are. There's the service worker. In the service worker itself, there's the send message function. It displaying, sorry, not the send message, but the message event right here. We got message received being displayed. So message received, and then it calls the send message function. That sends a message back, hello from message, back to our web page. And there it is. So that's working. Now, in the instance where you do not have a client ID, that's all right, because there is a client's object with a match all method. This gets all of the clients, not just the current one, but we can say all of the clients, all of the tabs that are currently sharing, tabs and windows that are sharing this service worker, this gets a list of all of them. So all the IDs. So then we can say, here's our client list when that comes back. And from that client list, we can loop through it and then send a message to every single one of them. So client list for each. So for each client, we're going to send a message. There it is. Okay. So I am going to comment this one out in the message. I'm not going to send to a specific client. I'm going to send to all clients. So this is to all clients, which will go in here. I'm not actually using that variable here, but we could. We could do this. We could say message, use that string. There's our object. So the property name is going to be to all clients, and this is the message. And that object is going to be our ev.data. All right, so I'm calling, when I send a message, it's calling this without a client ID, so this code right here should match. So let's go back to our web page, make sure we have our latest service worker installed. I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to open up a new tab. So all of these, if I open up the console and all of them, let's clear that out. Open up the console here and clear that out. And we'll clear this one out. Now, when I send message to service worker, all three of these tabs are controlled by the same service worker. So we should be getting this message right here, sending to all tabs from the service worker. That should be coming back there and there. So we can broadcast to each one of our clients. And it's not just broadcasting to anybody that's listening to the broadcast channel, like the video that I previously did on broadcast channel messaging. This is specifically from the service worker to tabs and windows that it is currently actively in control of. There is a clients.claim method. So you could theoretically here do this. You could say clients.claim. That method is intended for the service worker to claim all the potential ones. So a better way to put that is claim all clients within its scope. So all the pages that are active in any tabs or windows that fall within the scope of this service worker, so they're in subfolders or the same folder, this service worker is going to claim them all as clients. So when we do clients match all, it would grab all of those tabs. And that's it. That is the client messaging API. So if you're looking for a copy of this code, if you look down in the description, you'll find a link to the code gist with these files. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comments. I answer as many as I have time for. I am going to be making another video on the message channel way of messaging, which is a way of connecting only 2 points, so 2 tabs or a service worker and a web page, connecting them with ports. So you only get 2 at a time, and it's like a private conversation between those 2 things. But that's going to be the next video that I make in this playlist. If you look down in the description, you'll also see the link to the broadcast messaging video. And as always, thanks for watching.